Hello, grown-up giggers! I am so excited to bring you another new interview, an inside look at dream jobs held by real people. And I revived this right now because I had the opportunity to interview Tara Sophia Mohr. And she is so freaking fantastic. And her book is coming out next month. And I said, oh my God, will she do a grown up gigs with me? Because I need to talk her face off for an hour and introduce her to all of you and have you guys be able to ask her questions. So she's here with me. Thank you so much for being here, Tara.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I adore your work and your spirit, so this is a pleasure.
Mutually just the most wonderful, amazeballs thing. Um, so before we dig in, let me just introduce you guys and Tara also to Spreecast. Welcome to Spreecast if you haven't been here before. If you have been here before, but it was a while ago, you might see things have changed around a little bit. Um, but it's still the greatest platform I found because not only could Tara and I both be here live and you could see us, but you guys have a chat area with each other. So if you see, I've already left three things in the chats with Tara's links and with my links. You could also say hello and feel free to introduce yourself and leave the URLs of wherever you live online. We'd love to be able to connect each other, which is great. And then there's going to be plenty of time for your questions. So you'll see an ask a question like button or box. I'm not actually 100% sure exactly what you see, but you'll see something that'll say ask a question and you could type your question in there. I will see them as they come in and we're going to be breaking throughout the hour to get your questions answered. So don't just wait until the end. When you hear Tara or myself say something that makes you want to ask a question, just ask it, and when there's a natural break for it, we're going to get it answered for you. So please don't be shy. And I think that's it with the Spreecast. Yay! Okay, so Tara, you have such a rich and like very kind of career history. Could you take us through first what you wanted to be when you grew up, like way far back when, as long as you can remember, and then just like the short version of how you traveled to where you are now.
Yeah. Well, what I wanted to be when I was growing up, like you, I had a theater background. So I
Hmm.
wanted to be on stage. I was like dreaming of being on Star Search. That was like one of my childhood dreams. Or having a talk show like Oprah.
Uh-huh.
That was another big thing. And my path, I really got lost along the way from, I grew up loving theater, loving dance, loving creative writing, also always loving psychology and personal growth. But especially by the time I got to college and then graduate school, I found it really hard to hold on to those things in very intellectual, more left brain, cerebral,
Mm.
competitive environments. And so I kind of I think of it, sometimes when you see like a piece of grass, working its way up through the sidewalk. It's like it's not
Mm.
really an environment for it to thrive, but some little piece is finding its way up.
Mm.
For a long time, I feel like I did that, where my desire to contribute something positive and to use some amount of writing in my work that kind of found expression through going into the nonprofit sector and working for different causes that I cared about. Um,
Mm.
and even the creative writer in me kind of found expression by being an English major and writing about other people's works of creative writing.
Mm.
Um, but eventually that became really painful, as it
Mm.
does when we're not following our right path. And so for me, it was actually when I was coming up on my 30th birthday that I had a real reckoning
Mm.
and started to think about some of those childhood dreams again and wonder why I felt so afraid of
Mm.
going for anything remotely in the vicinity of them, and started on a path of trying to figure out how was I going to find my way back to them and find the courage to go for them.
Mm.
And for me, part of that was first hiring a coach. Well, actually, first deciding to get trained as a coach because
Uh-huh.
I loved I loved personal growth and I loved psychology and I loved spiritual life and I grew up reading self-help books and psychology books and I had gotten away from all of that by also being in educational environments where that wasn't really valued. And
Mm-hmm.
so I had this intuition, like, I don't know what that I'll become a coach. I'm not even necessarily thinking I want to become a coach, but I know that just going to this training, which was something I could do
Mm-hmm.
on the side of my job at the time, was like a way back into that
Mm.
personal growth world. And then as part of the training, I had to hire a coach. And of course, my coach was really good at being like, digging back into those childhood dreams and helping me
Mm.
reconnect to them. And from there, that's when I realized I really did want to be writing, and I started writing about my own life and about personal growth, about women in leadership, which had always been a
Mm.
passion for me, and slowly built the career that I have now.
Ugh. Oh my gosh, I love just that whole story, and you write about that in more detail in your book, and it's so great. How you've put it all together, how you really come back to yourself. It just seemed like it was years and years and years of pushing down the creative, unrealistic piece
Yeah.
of what it is you wanted to do, and knowing. Um, and I find this a lot, and Deb just said this in the chat. I wonder how many of us in the coachy writing worlds come from a theater
Mhm.
background. And I think that when we are creative, artistic people, but we're smart, we know that we're smart. Like, I think we're told, oh, no, 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 you could do so much more with your life than just be an actor or just write books. Like, you're needed elsewhere. You need to be doing something more serious. And so it sounded like that was a bit of your dilemma. And you kind of
Mhm.
chose one path, neglecting the stuff that was still so true, and necessary for you. And then you found your way back to that.
Yes. And another part, I find that for creative people, I did not find the my college environment or my graduate school environment to be creatively nurturing at
Mm-hmm.
all. Even
Mm-hmm.
though they were places with a great, quote unquote, great theater program and a great art program, it was such a competitive and
Yeah.
critical atmosphere that the artistic part of me got really scared. Like, what? You want me to write a poem, which then, like, what we're going to do is workshop it in a class and everyone's going to mark it up with their pen and tell me how they think it could be better. And the teacher's going to, put a grade on my poem. Like,
Mm-hmm.
that for me really shut down my writing voice. And so
Mm-hmm.
I had to figure out how to recover from that and let
Mm.
go of worrying about what other people were going to think about my work in order to just start writing again.
So how did you deal with that back then? Like, how were you able to reconcile that? And then I'd be curious too of, you know, what would you tell someone that's going through that now with all of the work that you've done and kind of standing so far on the other side of that?
Yeah, yeah. Well, back then, what would happen, and I see this now with a lot of women I work with, is that both the positive feedback and negative feedback on my writing were equally destructive to me. Because
Mm.
if a teacher loved something and gave it an A plus, then I just started to expect that that's what should happen when I write something. Or every time I sat down to write something, I got freaked out that, how is this thing going to live up to the other thing? But then if I
Mm-hmm.
got negative feedback, it felt like, oh, I'm really not good. No one understands my voice. This isn't a safe space. So it hurt in both ways. And a lot of the research that's coming out now about praise and praise for kids shows that it
Mm-hmm.
can be equally destructive as criticism.
Mm.
And for me, what helped was, first of all, just, sometimes we just change out of pain. So the
Mm-hmm.
first thing that helped was
Mm-hmm.
going years without writing. And that becoming, I mean, this isn't what helped, but that was part of my process that eventually that became so painful that I was willing to face some of my fears about not being a good enough writer or this and that and sit down and just do it anyway because I didn't want to continue to be out of touch with that part of myself.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, there was like an aha moment one day when it was very early in my return to writing, and I was sitting at the computer trying to write, and things just weren't flowing because I was really constricted internally. And I just had a little like thought popped up, like light bulb in my head that said, like, if you're going to write, you have to write for yourself.
Mm.
And it was like, oh, like the reason I'm sitting here at this computer is because I actually love the experience of writing. Like that
Mm.
really makes me feel good. It really lifts me up. And that's why I'm writing this blog post today.
Mm.
And just for those minutes, I'm going to try and like set aside worrying, is anyone going to comment? Is anyone going to like it? Is this good? Is this something my college, Ivy League English professors would think was okay? Like all that crap, set it aside and write it from my own experience.
Mm.
And I had to consistently really focus there for a long time to do that. And it's funny because actually now what I was doing this morning, it's like, wow, that was 2008. Now it's 2014. What I was doing this morning is editing an essay of mine that's going to be in the Sunday New York Times
Oh
this
my God.
Sunday. And the essay is about women unhooking from praise and criticism. So it's like quite the full circle
Well,
situation.
I mean, when I heard that, when you sent me the email being like, "Oh my God, this is happening," I was like, "You were such a role model. You were such a role model for this." So, I mean, your work, your book is called Playing Big. Your work is about playing big. I love how you wrote in your book that American women are liberated, but they're not empowered. That line particularly really hit home
Mm,
for me. So
yep.
now having you, like, you're obviously qualified to write this book from a personal place, and then knowing all of the education and experience that you put on top of it, it's like, oh my, everything here is gold. I'm holding my Kindle.
Thank you.
I wish I had the real book, because I'm like,
Here, I have
yes, this book, do you have it? Okay, let's see.
it. Is it?
Yay, there it
Coming out
is.
October 14th. Wait, that woman on the cover looks so much like me.
I mean, which is incredible
I
too,
haven't
right?
ever looked into a camera looking at myself and me on the cover at the same
And
time. It's
talking
funny.
about playing big, right? Talking about playing big, like not
Yeah.
only having your book and your work be heralded in this way, but like you're on the cover and now the New York Times is saying yes, and it all ties
I
together.
feel like, yeah, I'm trying to walk the talk. And, one thing that, well, a couple things I want to say about that. One is, the way I define playing big, it's what playing big means to each woman. So not
Mm-hmm.
everybody's playing big. It has to be about being on the cover of anything or being in a newspaper or whatever. It's like, what are your dreams for your life and career?
Uh-huh.
But I know for me, quite honestly, my playing big dreams did have to do with being in the media and having my writing getting out there and impacting people. And it also has to do with, changing some of my deeply held beliefs. So when that New York Times article came in, I have my own, old stuff that's like, well, I don't know how to write in a grown up enough voice for the New York Times. Or
Mm.
my work isn't enough based on research, like all this crap. So part of my playing big, it's not just about the external, the New York Times, but it's like walking through, continuing to like walk through that threshold, walk through that
Right.
threshold, and do the things
Right.
that challenge those beliefs.
And you talk about that more in your book. And what's really stuck with me too, you reminded me of that example of the woman who was in your Playing Big course, who, when it was time for them to decide what to leap on, and you have a whole chapter on
Oh yes,
leaping. And I love it because, and you could probably succinctly explain leaping better than I can. Could you
yeah,
explain it
I will.
succinctly
Yes.
for everyone?
So
Yeah.
a leap is a very specific. Sorry, I have a new haircut, and this thing is
It's
crawling in my
gorgeous.
eye in a new way. So
Gorgeous.
I thank you. It needs a little. Okay. Um, so a leap is a very specific kind of action that I really encourage women to take, and that I try and take in my own life. And it helps us get out of the stalling on our playing bigger and the
Mhm.
ways that we hide from that because the thing about brilliant women is that we hide and stall on our playing bigger in very brilliant, sophisticated ways. For
Mm.
example, we'll convince ourselves like, oh, I really want to write my memoir. That's my playing big. So I'm going to go over here and take this 18-month course on memoir writing, right? Instead of
Yeah.
what a leap would be. A leap is
Okay.
an action that gets you playing bigger right now. It
Uh-huh.
always has to be something you can complete within 1 to 2 weeks. It
Mm-hmm.
needs to be something that gets your adrenaline flowing.
Mm-hmm.
And really importantly, and this one is often really hard for people to fully get, it, it has to be something that puts you in contact with the audience or people that you want to influence or reach in your work in some way. So
Mm-hmm.
for that same woman, a leap could not be just sitting by herself in her house and writing the introduction to her memoir.
Okay.
But if she were to write, 10 pages of her memoir and share it with 5 people who are in her target audience demographic and hear their reaction and feedback, that would make it a
Right.
leap. So you were sharing the story of
Fabulous.
this
Right.
woman who her leap was, which one are you thinking of?
Her leap was like, I'm going to sit and write down all the ideas
Yes.
that I have, and then I'll eventually pick one to do maybe in the future. And you were like,
Right.
no, no,
No.
no,
No.
no, no. That's
Yeah.
not what it is. And that kind of went hand in hand too with you talking about um, the statistics that you found about how many women will turn down speaking roles that they're offered around things that they absolutely have the authority to speak on, but yet they've convinced themselves that they don't. And men do not have that problem. Men are able to say, like,
Yes.
oh, yeah, I just read about this a few weeks ago. I could go stand on stage and tell it to people. But as women,
Exactly.
we're
Exactly.
giving ourselves this story as to why we're not ready, we're not able, we're not enough. Oh, I hear that word from my clients. I know that you do too. And I always go, well, what is enough? How do you know what enough will be? And nobody ever knows. There's like
Right.
no
Right.
measurement of enough, but it's what's holding all of us back.
Yes. And this is so important too for people thinking about, what's their career going to be and creating a career out of our creative skills because we can get really caught up in the I'm not an expert thing. I
Yes.
think that's such a common narrative for women. I'm not an expert in this, or I'm not enough of an expert to
Mm,
speak. And I think, first of all, our bar for what qualifies someone as an expert is way too high. Like in my
mhm,
definition, I think we hold this concept like the expert is someone who's already in their 50s and 60s who wrote their PhD on it and then worked on it for 20 years and knows everyone else in the field. I think of it more like if you have been thinking deeply or working deeply in an area for some number of years, like you actually are an expert on that thing that
mm,
you've had your brain absorbing for years, that
mhm,
you've been in the trenches on for years. It doesn't need to be 20 years, and it doesn't need to have a certain type of training or qualification around
right,
it.
right.
But I also think that we are too quick to assume we can only contribute on things we're experts on. And
Mm-hmm.
actually, a lot of times it's the person who has a personal experience with something. For example, so they're not an expert on teens with, you know, um, teens who grew up in homes with domestic violence, but they
Mm.
were a teen who grew up in a home with domestic
Right,
violence. So,
right,
like,
right.
their TED talk or their op ed on that is not going to be as important or as valuable as the traditional expert. I think a
Mm,
lot of women overlook what we have to contribute based on our own story or
mm,
what we have to contribute because we're not an expert, but we have expertise in another field. And then we bring that to a new field. So like
mhm.
your musical theater background, right? Like that so informs your coaching business.
Yeah.
Um, but so that's not traditional expert in how to build a coaching business, but you're actually bringing something by coming from I call it being a cross trainer, bringing that other
Right,
type of
right,
expertise.
right. And it's so true. And I think that in, the age of the internet, quote unquote, um, how people decide who they want to work with and on what. It's no longer about the degrees or the masters or the education as much as it's about them resonating with that person in some way and being able to see whatever that person is offering and their personality and their perspective on things. They're able to say, oh, I know that I'm going to work well with that person. They're going to understand me in a way that I want to be understood.
Yes.
And then they know what they're doing. But that doesn't have to be
Yeah.
anymore, big degrees, PhDs, sort of things. But yet, even though I think the majority of us, especially who kind of live online and like are part of these online circles and have online businesses, even though we know that that's how we make our decisions, we still convince ourselves otherwise, which is
Yes, yeah. And I
great.
still hear a lot of women, struggling with, but so many other people are talking about this. And I'm always like,
Mm-hmm.
what? Like, but no one else can deliver it with your flavor. And there's some
Mm-hmm.
people on this planet who need to be reached by your flavor of it.
Yes, yes. Tess just put up a comment, and I actually would love to put it up on the screen because I feel like there's a question within it. And again, I want to encourage everyone to
Yeah,
write their questions as they're coming up because we're going to have time for all of that. Um,
yeah,
okay, is it up on the screen? There it is. There it is.
yeah,
So Tess says cross training has been such a huge advantage for me personally, but it's really hard to sell it and explain the value to others because they think in very straight lines mostly, especially for corporate jobs. So I would love, Tara, your thoughts on
yeah.
how you kind of sell your cross trainingness or even your multi-passionate creative nature to a more traditional
Yeah.
person, company.
Well, I think a couple things. I think it can be hard to get across on a resume because there are people who are
Mhm.
going to be really looking at what organizations you worked for. But I think a cover letter or an initial, if you can get on the phone with the person doing the hiring, or certainly if you make it to the interview stage, like any of those places where you can sort of explain more in prose, here's the underlying skill set I used in this job, and here's why I see it as the same underlying skill set for this
Mhm.
other role in a different field, or here's why I feel it would so enrich um, the work environment or help me solve the kind of problems that need to be solved in this role.
Mm,
So I think the applicant has to connect the dots.
mhm,
Um, and sometimes it's important to really get underneath to the fundamental skill. So, for example, rather than just saying, I feel like my skills from the nonprofit fundraising world are could be really relevant in this marketing role. It's like drilling down to say, the core things that I was doing in that fundraising job were relationship building,
mm,
creative
mhm,
design, communications, and those are also central to this role. And let me tell you, more about how I can then use those underlying skills in this new context.
bring me in for an interview and I will tell you how else I could use
Yeah,
these skills.
yeah, yeah.
It's fabulous.
And Tess said, thanks. I think you hit it within context. How does it solve the problem?
Mm,
Yeah.
mm.
Connecting
And
it to the business need. Cool.
adding on to that, I just have to mention a new type of resume, which I think is
Oh, yeah.
starting to be embraced, I think, by more traditional places, but it's a skills-based resume as opposed to a chronological resume. And I think you could still make it so that it appeals to corporations and more traditional places to work, but because it highlights your skill set and how it relates to the jobs that you're doing, you could very much tailor that resume to the skill set
Mm,
that job needs and put your examples and measurables and stuff in there. And
that's a great point. Yeah.
thank you. I get so excited with that sort of resume and any other way to kind of present ourselves that isn't the chronological, boring
Yeah.
resume that just usually doesn't help anyone at any point. I'm hoping just the
Yeah.
resume dies within the next few years. Like that would be great. I don't think it's going to,
That would be
but
great. And maybe though, I don't know,
maybe.
now like just between LinkedIn and the other ways that, yeah,
hmm
maybe.
hmm That's a Whole nother conversation for a whole nother
That's a whole
time.
nother conversation.
A whole nother conversation. Let's jump back a
I'll
little.
recommend some other guests for that
Yeah,
conversation.
right. I know you don't want to have that conversation. But related to that, related to what you do want to talk about, and I love to, in your book, you talk all about callings and how you could find your
Hmm.
calling and listen to your calling and really like the themes that have emerged throughout your life. So, if you could give us a little bit of your background as to how you found like this niche for yourself in empowering women and working within like female leadership and helping them get into
Yeah.
those roles,
Yeah.
that would be great to hear
Well,
about.
yeah, I think the kind of headline good news, and I imagine this will probably resonate for a lot of people listening, is that everything that in my childhood felt like a schizophrenic, disparate split
Mhm.
conflict of different parts of myself and different worlds now like all weaves together and is what
Mhm.
people will often say this is why I really love your work because it combines A, B, and C, or it's really
Mhm.
different because it has this side and that side. So whereas in school it was like really confusing because I we didn't talk too much about this, but I was raised in a home where like new age spiritual books, floor to ceiling shelves in the living room. I was, when I came home from school and said, like, Johnny teased me at recess, my mom said, "What do you think's going on for Johnny at home?" That was causing confusion with children at recess. So that's how I was raised. So I had, the spiritual, psychological, inner life is everything. But then I would go to school and I'd be like, this is so weird. We're like learning about the Civil War, but like nobody's talking about like the generals' childhoods and how that obviously contributed to the decisions that they're making in the war. Like that's weird. Or be like, really? We like started World War I because like so and so got offended by so and like why was there no EQ like
Right,
going on for
right,
anyone.
right,
So
right.
all those things felt really separate. So my path continued that way where, I had this very strong academic school life, went to Yale, then went to Stanford Business School, but then always had this spiritual, psychological, personal growth, personal passion.
Hmm.
And then I had this creative side, writing, dance, theater. So Um, so the way that I feel like all of those come together now is I'm doing personal growth work with women and writing about all that personal growth stuff I'm passionate about. My medium is all that stuff that I love, writing, being on camera, doing television things, speaking. That's the theater part comes out when I do
Hmm.
public
Hmm.
speaking.
Hmm.
Um, and um, and there's what a lot of people say is that like there's a intellectual rigor to my work that comes from that more left brain academic side, or just a lot of women will be like, I've never really didn't know if I could find a personal growth like teacher I could trust, but then like I see that you have an MBA and that makes me feel okay, like she's kind of rooted in the world. And there's a lot of things I can do also because of that business side, like more, I think more likely to get to speak in corporations and
Hmm.
stuff like that. But in terms of how I got there, so I kind of left off, I explained I had gotten my coaching training just to help myself get back into that personal growth world. Then I started coaching just whoever would show up,
Hmm.
$25 a session while I was getting my training,
Ah, that's what I
working my
charge
full-time
too.
job.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, it's a great rate, right? I
It
would, I would get up at 5. I would write a blog post. I would go to my job. I worked
is.
at a foundation at the time as like as a program officer, giving out money and reviewing grant proposals. And then I would go. I had a little like office I rented for like 7 hours a week, and
Mm.
I would go there and see clients in the evening. And I found that I was seeing a real pattern in women who were showing up, which was what I could best describe as them playing small,
Mhm.
not seeing their own capabilities, not seeing themselves as ready for leadership, all that kind of thing we were just talking about.
Mm.
And I also recognized that pattern in myself. And I also saw it in my dear friends who I thought the world of, and was like, why are they, why aren't they sharing their ideas more in their company? And like, why are they struggling so much? Why are we all struggling so much to
Mm.
really believe in what we think and what we have to say and to put it out there? And then I surveyed my blog readers and I asked them about the biggest challenges in their lives. And it was a multiple choice list with, work life balance and stress and da da
Mm.
da da. But I also put I'm playing small on that list of potential things for them to choose as the biggest
Mm.
challenge in their life. And when the responses came back, I'm playing small was what the most number of them
Mm.
had chosen.
Mm.
And that for me was like, yeah, there really is an epidemic of women playing small. And shockingly, we know we're playing small. We're walking
Mhm.
around knowing that,
Mhm.
not liking it, and not really knowing what to do about it.
Mm.
And, I'm such a big, I love, even though I never loved one on one coaching and it's totally not my element,
Mm.
um, it was a great place to develop my methodology to see
Mhm.
with each of those clients what really worked and what really produced change for them. And I started to see there was a kind of an arc where it was like, yeah, these tools actually aren't that helpful. We're going to start phasing them out. These are the, 5 core things that are
Right.
really helping produce change for them. And so then I turned that sequence, that
Mm.
sort of personal growth process into a course. And Tara Gentili, who some of you probably know, was
Mhm.
helping me at the time, like just figure out because I didn't know anything about doing online courses or selling anything online. And so,
Right.
um,
Right.
and so she helped me kind of get a little comfortable with that. But really, from the first session, that idea of a course about playing bigger and the approach and what the elements were resonated really strongly. So the first
Mm.
cohort had 70 women in it, um, and now there's over 1,000 women have been through it, and so that
Amazing.
that became my niche,
Mhm.
and I love it. And now it's a book.
And now it's a book. Oh my gosh, on my Kindle. It's a book and a Kindle and my glowing screen. You could see it. Um, that's really exciting. So it seems like it was and again, you talk more about this in the book, but it seems like you found this niche as a combination between um, your own passion for empowering women and that's just an important thing for you to be
Yes.
working on and a fulfilling thing for you to be working on and something that it seems you've been doing, I mean, ever since you were in school.
I have,
Um,
yes, and
right?
yes,
So
it's
it's
another
it's
thread that, yeah, for me, huge. Like working on women's issues, ran the women's
mhm.
organization at my business school, literally changed the curriculum of my high school when I was
That was
15 because there were no
amazing.
books written by women in the English class. That was my first real experience of a calling. That actually, if people go to my blog, my last blog post was about that first experience of feeling a sense of calling to do something
Hmm.
about a problem in the world. Um, I just, yeah, for me, when women's voices are missing, like I cannot live with it. I
Mm.
cannot let it go.
See, so I have to like put that in big blinking lights, especially for those who are here that are trying to figure out that thread that ties all the things that I want to be doing together. And I love too that um, you're really not so hard with the calling of like, what is your calling in life? It is only one thing. It's one thing forever, and it's the same thing, and you need to find it. And your
Yeah.
your view is so much softer than that and so much more, I think, helpful and understanding, especially to us women whose values change and our priorities change, and I think just
Yeah.
people in general. Um, but being able to say, you know what, no, the calling is just what you feel right now that's important, that you need to contribute
Yes.
to, a way for you to bring something good into the world and make the world better. And that could be something enormous like let's go cure cancer, or it could be let's paint and make the world prettier. And both of them are
Yes.
valid.
So I think we get really stuck in the question, what's my calling? That is a very
Uh-huh.
stressful question. It has like that,
Mm-hmm.
there's one right soulmate, right? I have to find the one right answer. And it can be a
Forever.
paralyzing question,
Forever.
right? and we feel
Right.
like we're not enough, or we think something was our calling and then we lose energy about it. So now, was I wrong? That, gosh, that really felt like a calling that wasn't it. So that's really discouraging. So I think what's my calling is really not a great question to ask. I recommend instead the question, what's calling me right now? So that the
Mm-hmm.
goal isn't to find out the answer. The goal is to become a woman who's able to be very responsive to her callings as they come and go, and
Mm-hmm.
that they have a lifespan. And that being said, I think a lot of times there's connecting themes across our callings, right? So for
Mm-hmm.
me, the calling to change my school's English curriculum so that there were books by women has a real connection to the calling to help women learn how to share their voices in the world.
Mm-hmm.
But there are certainly other callings I felt in my life that are around different themes. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and and as you're saying, I also believe, yeah, calling can be something. It was in the post that I wrote on Tuesday about callings and talking about them in this way. This woman wrote a beautiful comment about she had just finished building a wheelchair ramp for her 94-year-old grandfather. And
Wow.
she said in reading the post, she felt like, oh, actually, yes, she felt a real calling to do that. It kind of met that criteria of having a sense of this work is mine to do. I feel assigned to do this. I feel a sense of rightness and meaning doing it.
Mm.
Um, and that, my definition of a calling is it's the assignment we get to bring light or love into the world in a particular way.
Mm-hmm.
And that can be a 1 day way or a 20-year way.
Right. 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 Well, and how you wound up working on this calling, and I have a feeling that this calling will be changing, right? I mean, if we talk to you in another 5 years or 10 years, it might still be, I want to empower women. I want to make sure that they, really step up and do what they need to do. It might not live in playing big. It might have a different name. It might
Right.
be a different offering. Um, so it's interesting to know how fluid that is, but I think it's also interesting and probably not coincidental that what you ended up polling your coaches or prospective coaches about, and the external feedback you got led you to, oh, it's this playing small piece. And then that
Yeah.
ties into what I've been so interested and passionate about all along, in
Yeah.
a way.
And I think
So,
one thing that's been hard for me because of my creative artist side is that um, the way that, like, the whole idea of titling your work and figuring out how to talk about it in the world,
mm-hmm.
that's really the part it's so important, not what your inner artist wants to call it,
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
but what says what is the right invitation for your desired audience.
Mm,
And so it's interesting because playing big is not my favorite phrase in the world, actually.
interesting.
Um, the work behind what the playing big process is exactly, what I want to be teaching and what I believe in. And I'm
Mm,
comfortable with playing big, but it's more like that is the best succinct way
uh-huh.
I could talk about what I'm doing in a way that clicked for people,
Mm-hmm.
and that felt like a powerful invitation for them. And I've just found that again and again in my work. Like, there's a little bit of my artist self that wants everything to be a perfect expression of its voice, often is not going to be the part of me that's leading in how something is framed or what it's called.
Right.
Because that's where we really do have to meet the marketplace in order for our work to reach people.
Mm, it's really interesting. I can't believe I'm looking at the time. We only have 20 minutes left in our interview, and I just want to encourage everyone again that don't kick yourself in 21 minutes when we're off the air and you
Yeah,
haven't
and I
asked your
love
question. Um,
And I always say when we're on the playing big calls, before we, like, when we're at a question and answer part, I always
yeah.
say, like, please do not let your inner critic prevent you from asking a question. Like, if you're having any kind of thought of like, put that out there, that really won't make sense, or if that maybe I missed it and they said that earlier, like, that's all inner critic stuff. And I'll be so sad if we miss out on your voice in the conversation because of that. So
Hmm.
part of the playing big is actually not listening to that voice right now and sharing whatever's on your mind.
Thank you. And I would,
Okay.
yes, okay, yes. And I would encourage you guys too to share in the chat, even if you don't have a direct question, what you think is the biggest thing preventing you from playing big. I would be so
Mm,
interested in hearing what is coming out, and I'm sure, Tara, that it's like things that you cover in your book. I would think at this point that you're not hearing too much that's like totally new. So hopefully that's a comfort to all of you guys
yeah,
out
but
there
try and
as
challenge me. That
well,
would be
right?
awesome if someone comes up with something new. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So that's the challenge, but also hopefully a comfort that like something you're saying is what's holding you back is
Oh, yes.
probably 95% of the time will be something that Tara has heard before and what we've all been experiencing. Deb
Yes,
is
and
so
Deb says
brave.
I'm not ready.
I'm
Yeah,
not
so
ready.
this actually, in 2010, I think it was 2010, I wrote an article called 10 Rules for Brilliant Women,
Mm,
which you'll see it still lives as a page on my website. If you go to taramore.com, it's in the navigation because it just has struck a chord with so many women. And rule number 6 of 10 rules for brilliant women, Deb, is literally, this is the rule, is question the voice that says, I'm not ready yet. Because what I found is that brilliant women, like all of you, as much as, my general orientation as a coach will always be listen to yourself, connect with your
hmm
inner voice, your intuition. My exception to that rule is if there's any kind of comment from your inner voice about what you're ready for and what you're not ready for. Because what I find is that when we feel just afraid of the vulnerability and visibility that comes with playing bigger, or when we feel worried about what other people are going to think, when our inner critic is speaking up, all of that, we're too sophisticated to let those normal excuses get in our way, like I'm not good enough, or I'm worried
hmm
that I'll look fat on the TV show that I was just invited to be on, or I think I'm worried that no one will buy the book, whatever.
hmm
So we kind of create a slightly more a version that sounds a little more psychologically sophisticated, which is like, I'm just not ready yet. I need to take more time for blah. And I want to feel ready and prepare. And I've checked in with myself and it's not the right time. And, of course,
hmm
maybe there's something there, but in almost every case where that's going on for women, it's really just the core fears that are always going to be there when we step into playing bigger. There is no graduation day from those fears. So it's
Right.
time to walk through them now.
I tell my clients sometimes that the louder those voices get, actually, the more excited I get because it means they're getting closer to the thing that they're supposed to
Yes,
be doing, that
yes,
they're like freaking out their inner critic so much that the inner critic is now just like letting loose on a, tirade
yes,
of obnoxious, untrue, but hurtful things. It's like, oh no, that's
yeah,
actually really great because it means
yeah,
you're doing your work enough to freak out that voice.
exactly. Because I talk about,
That
the
voice.
critic is like a guard
I love
that
it.
is at
And
the edge of our comfort zone. So if you're in
yes,
the comfort zone, the guard can take a nap for a long time. But it's when you approach
absolutely.
the edge that the guard wakes up and starts, waving stuff at you. Yeah.
I love that visual. And so Tanya says the things that could keep me small can often be as silly as what to call myself. Ooh, especially with so many avenues and how I want to help people. Can you talk more about how to focus? Ooh, focus is the F word in my vocabulary. I don't know if you feel the same, Tara. But can you talk more? Every time I hear it or see it, I'm like, ooh, there's the F word. Can you talk more about how to focus more on the invitation to people than the name or the description for what you do? That's such a great question.
Yeah, I'm just curious, well, I guess Tanya can't share succinctly what she does. That's what I was going to ask her back, but I mean, I just want a word of context on like what your some word of context about your work.
I know Tanya, and I know that she is coaching, but she also has like a design part of her also.
Hmm.
Um, so I think maybe, and Tanya, obviously, like right in the chat if I'm butchering this. So, but I think that maybe now she's kind of moving into like what's the intersection. between
Yeah.
those worlds, and because they're probably two,
Okay,
fairly
got it.
different
Yeah.
worlds.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sort of thing.
Well, I would say, I mean, the first thing that's really great is you have noticed that this is a pattern for you. So now you
Hmm.
know that anytime you see you're getting stuck because you're unsure how to label yourself, you're like, okay, this is exactly my moment to like leapfrog right over that question and just get into whatever the action is anyway. So
Hmm.
whether that's like, I'm just going to set myself a 5-minute timer to write my bio paragraph for this particular purpose, and then whatever's there, I'm done.
Hmm.
Or, I'm not going to worry about having one consistent bio. I'm just going to use something different for, whatever the context is, and make it simple, whatever comes out. But
Hmm.
to just recognize that, it is basically a distraction. And to get into those leaps. So identifying
Hmm.
what's going to help you play bigger in the way you want to right now, something you can start and finish in 2 weeks that gets your adrenaline flowing, that puts your work in contact with people you want to influence or reach, and
Hmm.
jump into that. And you just won't have a lot of time to rework and rework how you talk about yourself.
Oh,
Is
and
that
Tanya,
helpful?
actually, I think it's totally helpful. Tanya, let us know if it's helpful. But Tanya also responded actually very succinctly to what she does. So, handmade goods is one arm of her business, as well as design coaching and creating sanctuary for people, as in self-care. I mean, I see a common thread with all of that. I'm sure you do too, Tara.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Um, so that I think is great perspective for Tanya. And
Um,
sometimes, sometimes we don't necessarily need to make things work so perfectly together, and we can keep them separate. I don't know if you would agree, but um, Tanya, if you want right now your handmade goods to live on one website and your coaching work
right.
to live on another website, then down the line you could see how do they fit? How do they fit together? Do you want them to cohabitate online somewhere? Otherwise, you could just keep it separate, and that's good too.
Yeah, and another important piece is actually, one of my favorite questions to ask people is like, is it
Hmm.
actually a problem? Because I
Hmm.
find that a lot of times we assume things are going to be a problem before we know if they are. So I would say, where are you hearing feedback from the world that
Hmm.
how you're describing yourself is confusing or it's too many things? Are you really getting that feedback? Or is that an old story based on kind of the high school guidance counselor test version of what a professional description of someone's supposed to look like? If it's just stories or beliefs about how much you need to focus, then that's really important to challenge. And then if you're getting real information from your clients or customers that something's confusing, get on the phone and learn more about that, and
Hmm.
then you can adjust accordingly.
Fabulous. I love it. It seems like a lot of the ways to start playing bigger is just by talking to people, as opposed to assuming and thinking and, sitting in your room alone. Instead, it's actually bringing other people into the conversation that are relevant to the things that you want to be doing.
Yes, I'm really big on that. I'm really big on like getting out of what I talk about in the book. And in Silicon Valley, we call it designing at the whiteboard, which is when you're in
Uh-huh.
your office, by yourself or just you and your team, designing your plans on your whiteboard, not checking them out with the people who you want those plans to reach. So, for
Hmm.
example, I still do, now I actually just was doing this last week. I periodically will just pull like 50 names from my mailing list. I will do a personal email from my Gmail and say, hi, like I like to find out who's reading. Do you have time for a 15-minute phone conversation
Mm.
with me? And some percentage of the people respond,
Right.
and I get on the phone and do those calls, and it's so important because I get to find out, what are you grappling with? What is your life like? It gives me
Mm.
people to hold in mind when I'm writing, so I don't have to have a fake
Mm.
customer avatar. I have real people who are
Uh-huh.
always totally different from whatever avatar I would have stereotyped.
Right.
Um, And I can also find out, like right now I'm asking, are you thinking of getting the book? And do you think you'll
Mhm.
pre-order? And how are the pre-order? Like I need to talk to my market. And one of the silliest ideas that we have is that we're supposed to get it all right in a vacuum, instead
Uh-huh.
of through conversation with the people we want to reach. I'm glad that was helpful for
Uh-huh.
you, Deb. Yeah.
Big
And Tanya, yeah,
time.
so Tanya is saying it was a lot of old stories about what do you do that she was feeling like she had to answer in a specific way. Good.
Mhm. I want to read my favorite quote from the book,
Oh,
because
good.
again, looking at the time, I feel like this would just be a really great place to wrap up, unless we have like one more question we could take. Um, but you wrote right in the beginning of the book, playing big doesn't come from working more, pushing harder, or finding confidence. It comes from listening to the most powerful and secure part of you, not the voice of self-doubt. Um, this is a perspective that I feel like I've heard before in different ways, but it didn't land with me the way that it had when I read this and then read really the first part of your book on inner critics and inner mentors. Was I think really, really huge for me, and I think can make a huge difference to everyone that's here and listening.
Mm.
Could you wrap us up with some inner mentor uh, talk as to what that is and how it could be helpful in getting past everything that we throw in our own way?
Yeah, it really is so powerful. And, all of you have probably been encouraged to find great women mentors to help you in your
Uh-huh.
career.
Uh-huh.
And that's fine. But what I find when I talk to women in my own experience too is that, yeah, we have sources of inspiration and people we really admire, but that kind of idea that there's going to be an older mentor who's going to show us the way, that's just not
Mhm.
how it pans out. And the inner mentor is the inner complement to that. And
Mm.
it comes out of my own coach training at the Coaches Training Institute and what they called the future self, which is um, going through a visualization and a meditation process, 20 minutes,
Mhm.
to meet an older, wiser version of yourself. Really, just to meet an older version of yourself. But it turns out when you go through it in that relaxed right brain visualization way, that the older self you meet is also a wiser self, an expression of your true essence, um, an expression of your highest self in a certain way.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
that once you have that vision, you can actually use that woman as kind of your North Star and
Mhm.
evaluate choices and decisions from the vantage point of what's going to help me become more like her or grow more into her. And this,
Mhm.
for me personally, was huge. Like from going from my, philanthropic career job, very left brain,
Mhm.
very unexpressed in my home and lots of aspects of my life, to getting that vision of this woman who was a writer and who
Mm.
dressed a certain way and lived a certain way. And it like really did give me the roadmap for how to shape my
Mhm.
life. So I'm a huge believer in it, and there's a lot more about it in the book. And then also with the book, you get a link to actually do the audio meditation with me
Mhm.
so you can meet your inner mentor. And I'm so excited because I'm actually going, of all things, I'm going in November and December to two conferences that Cosmo magazine is hosting. And
Yeah.
in each of them, there's going to be 2,000 millennial women who are going to meet their inner mentors through doing that visualization at the conferences. So I just love that too, that it's like they think they're going to like a Cosmo magazine conference
Right.
and they're going to get inner mentor visualization with me, along with
Um, it gives
presentation
me,
from Cameron Diaz and Eva Longoria.
oh my God, that's incredible. Talking about playing big.
It'll be fun.
Holy crap. Oh my God.
It'll be fun.
And that just gives me chills. I mean, to think of living in a world where women especially are not told that, all the answers lie in other people. And I think we're so
Yes.
used to putting the onus on everyone else. We have to take care of everyone else. We also have to listen to everyone else. Even I think the most confident of us, I consider myself a very self-confident person. And while I have the confidence to know, oh, I could build this business, I could do this thing, like I have that belief in myself, there's still that piece of me that's like, oh, but I don't have the answer. So and so has the answer, and so and so has the answer, and
Mm,
so and so has the answer. And I think right now we're in this era of like, let's go give everyone all the money for all their programs, and then let's just go from program to program to program to program. And that makes us feel like we're doing something, but really it's not. So to
yes.
think of giving, if all the women in all the world, not that I don't want them to be coached, like still, come to us and have people help you, but look inside yourself and know that that's where the answers are, and there's always still things to learn and grow into, but
Yes.
it's
And
within
I
you.
believe, the best coaching, which I know is what you do too, it's facilitating a process to help people get to their best inner answers, which is very different than um, coaching being confused with, giving advice and telling
Consulting,
people
yeah.
what to do. Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. Tara, I can't thank you enough for being here with me and with us today, and just for putting this work out into the world. I have to, I have to just tell everyone, like unsolicited. I mean, getting the copy of this book, I was super excited to get the advanced copy. I got it in the midst of all my crazy creative live stuff, where it's like, oh, I have to create and present 18 hours of content over a 3-day period. And I had like 3 months to put it together. And I did literally nothing else but that creative live work and my client work. And I read your book, Tara. And the timing for me was really interesting because creative live seemed like a way that I was playing big. It was a dream come true for me, and and it seemed like a really big thing. And that experience coupled with reading the book has actually opened my eyes to personal and professional things that I didn't, not only did, I don't want to say that I didn't think they were possible for myself. I didn't even think of them as things that I could do. So it's
Mm,
opened up these new ideas of how I'd want my business to look and how I'd want things to be, even on a personal level, um, that I just hadn't even thought of before as something that could be possible for me. So it's made a
so
really
fabulous.
big difference.
Mm.
It's fantastic. And I'm going to like use it as a guide now. The questions are wonderful and something to just keep coming back to. So I know everyone else can't get their hands on the book until October 14th, right? That's the release date.
October 14th, but I really want to
So
encourage
pre-order.
and ask people to
Yeah.
pre-order, because you pre-order and there's some additional videos and live Q&A calls with me that you get. And if you believe in the kind of things we're talking about today, it's just such a huge help if you can pre-order, because it really helps the book get a strong start in the world.
Yes, do it. And then you don't even have to worry, like, when it comes out, you're not rushing to the bookstore like
Remember, right.
it's coming to you. It's coming to you. You're going to give yourself a gift in about a
You're gonna be
month.
the
It's going to
first.
be
You're gonna be the very first
right.
to get it. Yes. Yes.
So they could
Thank
pre-order.
you
I
so
know,
much,
like,
everybody.
absolutely. And they should just go to taramore.com/book, and then they could pre-order from all the links and stuff there. Yeah.
Yeah, or they can just Google it on Amazon or
Amazon,
barnesandnoble.com or IndieBound or Powell's, or your Wiccan
wherever they
bookstore
want.
of choice or whatever.
Whatever, wherever you
Whatever
want to
it is.
buy it, just buy it. It doesn't
Yeah.
matter where. Pre-order it. I recommend it so highly, and I just thank you again so
Thank you.
much. Thanks
Thank
everyone
you.
for joining us today, and thank you,
Thanks,
Tara.
everybody.
Bye,
Bye.
everyone.